Howdy, my name is Derek Henry with XLEV8 Consulting. As a former BlackLine super user and award-winning solutions consultant, I get that sometimes it can be a little tricky to use, to set up, to administer on a day-to-day basis. The good news is I've got something that can help. I built an add-in in Excel that has a whole bunch of functionality, and some of it specifically helps quite a bit in doing all of those things in BlackLine. I've literally used them myself. So today we're going to walk through some of those, some specific examples, features, and why these are helpful. So let's dive right in. Now, some areas that you'll see in this is an add-in in Excel. It can connect Excel directly to BlackLine if you configure it to do so. Now, it can also connect to all kinds of other things, but we're going to focus on how it can connect to BlackLine if you want to help make setup easier, administration, even reporting. And as BlackLine adds more APIs, you can even do more. Next, we'll talk about how to automate repetitive steps using Excel to control Chrome. So when you load your BlackLine instance in it, you can have repetitive steps like things that you set up, or maybe it's users, maybe it's the same kinds of support that you add to different recs or tasks or something. The example that I use here, I use it every day as a BlackLine solutions consultant to prep the little things that I wanted to have in the instance because it was set every night. This did it in about 10 minutes, whereas I couldn't even do it manually in less than about 40. Then we'll just talk about some things we can streamline in common actions and defaults, easily mapping things, converting your source data to the BlackLine formats. That's something I've done quite a bit. A lot of shortcuts to help navigate, the big workbook that BlackLine uses to import things. There's a lot of sheets in there. Some of the things just make it easy to analyze and navigate, so we'll touch on those. And generally, you just find things quicker. You're going to have a lot of files. Well, if you could find your files very quickly with autocomplete, that's a big win because people spend a lot of time looking for information. And then lastly, there's some accounting stuff too, right? Actually, there's more. There's all kinds of other things, but we're going to focus on everything above. Okay, so let's dive in and look at what we're talking about here. We'll look at some specific things. The first one is how you would connect BlackLine directly to Excel and vice versa. So when you configure this, there's a macro called configure API settings. You can use macros of any kinds. The result of that is another tab. So the main add-in is this one, XLEV8. So you've got all these menus, all these sections. When you hover over it, it tells you what's going on. Specific macros. If there's a keyboard shortcut assigned, it'll tell you that. So that's the main add-in. One of the recent things that we've added is the ability to then extend this into connecting to different APIs. So some of the BlackLine things I'm familiar with, I set those up. I've got something to get, a LinkedIn search I do, who's working at what company, what's the weather history, songs I like on Spotify, what are exchange rates. So there are all kinds of APIs out there that are either open or that you have to have kind of credentials and a token to leverage. And it lets Excel directly interact with those on an import-export basis. Now, when you set this particular one up, when you run the macro configure API settings, it's going to open up a new workbook where you set it up and you're able to say, what is this thing that I'm going to use? What is the application that it's going to connect to? And then any of the credentials. Some of these are applicable, some aren't. It really depends on the nature of the application and what their needs are. You'll almost always have an API key. You're almost always going to have some kind of URL that you connect to. And in everything else, it's really just following the directions of that particular API's documentation. Now with the BlackLine one, there is a website that BlackLine's published. This is open to anybody, not just customers. Developer.blackline.com, and if you click APIs, you can see all the different APIs that you can connect to. And this is a growing list. There's some that are even out there that haven't been published yet from what I've heard. So you can use those. There's a ton of documentation on how to set these up. If you want specifically how I configured it, just ask me. I've done it before, so I'm happy to help there. But you'll fill these things in. I've whited this out so that people aren't taking the credentials that I've got. Nobody wants to do that. Or maybe they do, I don't know. So there are 3 fields you fill out for connecting to APIs. One is what accounts are you going to work with. For those of you that service BlackLine clients, you can have up to 20 separate instances that you connect to. So I would recommend putting the name like I did here, separating production and sandbox. Put that into the thing, put the client's name in there or the instance name, whatever you want to do. You can have up to 20 of those. And it's very easy to toggle between them, go back and forth. It'll confirm which one you want to use when there's more than one, or if you want to switch back and forth. So once you have credentials in place, you'll set up the actual calls. This is a variety of information, like what URL are you going to connect to, what is it that you want to do, and how do you want this UI up here to look? What sections do you want? What drop-down menus? What buttons in there? So like entities, if you're going to import those, or users, or a lot of user-based API calls. What group do you want it in, like admin? What menu do you want, like entities? And what do you want that button label to be, and what description do you want? And what application, right? So there are a whole bunch of data points here. Again, I've already built this out, so I can send it to you. As long as you're a BlackLine customer, I don't mind sharing that because I've already kind of tested it out. It has variables in it. So you might have your account domain. You might have something down here where you have to put in, what report do you want to run, or something else. If you're using matching, what data source do you want? What did you call that? So there's variables you can build in, and it guides you on how to do that with the cell comments and everything when you set this up, so that it'll work for your specific use case, right? And on some of these other ones, like the weather one down here, it might be that you have an input sheet, what location, what start date, what end date. So again, it guides you on how to do that, append your API key. These are like variables that will be replaced when it runs. And then lastly, if you're importing, there are a lot of fields that you might need to import, like in the case of users. So it says this is the sheet name you're going to use. Here are the fields you're going to have. Is it required or not? What validation do we have? It's going to build all this when you run it. And when you have an export, you can say, here are the fields that we want to export. Because a lot of times when you export, there's a whole bunch of data. So if you want just a few of those fields, you get to guide it on what that looks like. So let's look at an example here. Let's say we want to add new users, okay? There's a couple of ways to run this. You can use the UI up here. I like to use the search box because it's quicker. So to run this, the default shortcut is Control-Shift-W. If you type in API, you will see all the macros that are on that API sheet. That's going to separate them intentionally. Or you could search for the word users if you know exactly what you want. Now with the entire, press the mouse, or sorry, the arrow keys up and down to highlight the entire name. And with that entire name in there, press enter and it'll run. Now what this is going to do when you are going to be importing data, it's going to use that API field sheet to construct the sheet that the API needs with all the fields that are going to need to be imported. Okay, so when this is done, it goes a lot quicker when you're not trying to record a video. It says this, user sheet's required to import data, it's been added, follow the inputs, follow the comments. Okay, so we have all these fields, the yellow ones are required, that is something that you can configure. Okay, so you'll definitely want to do that. Now, you can put in names here, so let's just say we're going to put in a funny name, like Homer Simpson. One of the cool things this does is it's going to do validation as you go. So over here it says, columns B, C, D, F, H, I are not filled in yet, and they're required. So until you have all the required fields done, any other data validation is going to be used, like active and inactive. That's a data validation box that's been added. Again, you configure that on the field sheet, or copy and paste what I've done. Time zone, that's a drop down. So if you have any validation of any of these lists, or if it's supposed to be numeric or whatever, that's going to be taken into account to see whether this is valid or not. Now I'm going to copy and paste some things so you don't have to watch me actually do this. This is going to be a little bit of fun, right? We've got Princess Zelda, she's going to be added. If we also want to add one of the other macros in here, we'll copy the column widths very easily. So if we want to copy the column widths from this other one so you can see everything, had a little fun with this. She's a princess. She lives in Tokyo because she was made by Nintendo, etc. But notice it says valid now because we've filled in all the valid fields with valid values if there are some. We're good. We could import this. So how this works is you'd literally either use the UI or the ribbon up here, or you do that search again. Now when it finds this user sheet or whatever the sheet is that it's supposed to use to import, it's going to try to process that. If it doesn't find that sheet, it will add that sheet to your active workbook. Okay, so a lot of the macros in the add-in work that way. We're going to use this one just so you can see that it works that way too. It's going to say, here's the account, here's the app, here's the name, just so you know which instance or which account you're using. Do you want to proceed? We don't want to send junk somewhere, so this is intentional to have this prompt. So we're going to do that. We're going to say, yeah, we want to connect to it. When you click OK, it tells you at the bottom what it's doing. It says it's submitted, it's awaiting a response. And if everything connected correctly, it's going to say it imported. So if we went into BlackLine and took a look at that, you'd see Princess Zelda. Now, she doesn't have any access yet. She doesn't have any entities, but at least she's a user. That's how you import data really, really quickly. Notice there were no text files. You didn't have to decide whether you needed headers or not, or what columns. It does it all for you, okay? But this requires APIs to be turned on in your BlackLine instance. So if you really like this, we'll show you how to download it at the end of the video. Ask the support team to enable APIs. Do both data ingestion and reporting for your production in BlackLine and Sandbox instances and anything else you might have, okay? Now, in the meantime, there's other ways to do this. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at, we talked at this first one. Okay, now this next one is called export sheet as. That's a macro that you can run in here. So let's say you don't have APIs yet and you still want to leverage this. Well, we don't need these extra columns because those are actually going to mess up our output. But let's say we have this user and we want to add them. Okay, don't have APIs yet. Using a data import workbook, or again, you could use this even without the APIs turned on if you leveraging the settings I've already got put in here. But we're going to run a macro called export sheet as. Okay, it's the second one here. What this does is it lets you set defaults. Like we want this file. We don't want to have the header. We want it to be a text file. We want to use the sheet name as part of the file name so we know what it is we're importing, and then we want to add a timestamp. And here's where we want to put it. So all of these things can be saved as defaults if you want. And the next time you open this, you run that macro, this prompt comes up. This is all defaulted. When you elect not to export that header row, you see how the default range, it excluded that. We're only getting range A2 through L2. That's what you want. You know, so many of the errors I had when I tried to import data to BlackLine, it's because I didn't have that correct. So we're going to export this. And even better, it's going to say, hey, do you want to open that folder? Because maybe you want to drag and drop that into the BlackLine import box. Great, go ahead and do that. So when you click yes, it's going to open that folder up so that you can see that file. So let me drag that from the other side of the screen here so you can see it. This is a file that we just exported. Notice that timestamp is right now. When you open it up, this is the structure that you need, right? It's got everything tab delimited in a text file. That works for pretty much anything, not just the users tab, but really anything in the import workbook or anything else you might have. There's several different export types: text, Excel, CSV, PDF, even if you want to do that. And it will do all those things. And the key is that it defaults and it saves everything in one place, which dramatically reduces version control. Okay, so that's another thing that's helpful. Now, another one is creating a mapped file. Where is this helpful? Well, when you don't have IT completely bought in yet on getting BlackLine connected to your ERP, this can help. So what this one does, and it works with so many things well beyond just BlackLine, is it's going to allow you to take some data source and map it to what you need for some other purpose. Okay, so the example we're going to use here is the BlackLine accounts structure. So we want to import data. We want to import account data. I literally had to use a very similar process like this the first time I used BlackLine because we didn't have IT's help and we weren't going to have it for a few months. They were really busy. So we had to do something very much like this to get a trial balance, reconfigure it to the BlackLine structure, and import it to refresh our balances. And you know what? Even though that was 2 or 3 minutes, we still got a ton of value out of BlackLine. So even though that's not ideal, and you could be a little more efficient, add a little more control, it still saves a lot of time. So what this does is it allows you to say what fields do you want to include in your ultimate file to import or use, what source column, where do you want it to go. There's a lot of settings in here you can use so that you don't have to watch me fill that in. I'm going to copy and paste these from one that I did earlier. So these are all the fields that we need, right? We need entity ID, account number, all these different account strings. You guys have probably seen this before if you've used BlackLine. We want to leverage this source data sheet. We want the destination to be called accounts v5. We want to put it here. This is the format. We want to exclude that first row. That's why, the headers, that's why the first row says 2. And then here's what the prefix should say for the file that's ultimately going to be saved as a TXT. Okay, so BlackLine's going to do all these things. The plugin here, the Excel add-in is going to do all these things. Now, the other thing is you might have formulas. You might have to combine different things or apply a lookup table or some logic to do that. So in our source data sheet, let's drag this one over so it's right next to it. In the source data, we have this. It's a very common list of what you might see in a trial balance. Your different segments of the accounts, your description, your date, amount, etc. So we want all this in there. We want to append a few fields to add some references and things like that. That's what these formulas are going to do. So you fill those in as if they're in the first row beneath the header, so row 2, and it will fill them all in. So let's see what this does. Once we've configured all this stuff, you saw the source data. Right now the accounts sheet is blank. The roll-up sheet is where all the VLOOKUPs are that we're going to leverage. So let's see what this does. So we're going to run it again. Remember, it's looking for that sheet, create mapped file. If it does not find it in your active workbook, it will create it along with any other sheets you might need. So we're going to run this. It's going to copy, paste things. If you're just pointing one field to a column, it's just going to copy that. If you want it to fill in a formula, it will do that for you. If you want to put in a fixed value like a currency, because it should always be that value, you can do that. And it's going to say, hey, we recreated this for you. We exported the file. Do you want to see the folder? Very much like the last one we looked at. Well, sure, why not? So we can look at that as well, and it's actually in the same place as that other file we just looked at. The key is to keep all these files together so you don't have version control, and that's why we had timestamps. So this is what we just needed. Maybe we wanted it to have accounts v5 underneath it. Whatever you wanted to have right there. That's where you plug in your particular preferences. Okay. So we've looked at 3 that are really, really impactful. Let's talk about some. We got one more that's really impactful. This one's called Run Browser Steps. And what this lets you do is say, hey, we want Excel to control our browser. We want it to click things and pick values and fill in values and extract things. That's really powerful, right? I've had to download all kinds of reports, fill in information. I use this to file my expense report every month because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to look at last month to figure out what 30 clicks I had to do. I wanted Excel to do it and I just connected it to a couple of inputs like the date and maybe the amount of the thing that might change. Usually it's the exact same amount. It's just a different month, same day. So you're able to say what action, what value you want to fill in, what thing do you want to connect to. It's actually pretty easy to do that when you have Chrome or something where it tells you what it is when you right click and look at the developer console. So when you run this is a really basic one, right? I don't want to show anything too complex here. You can try this out for yourself. This is kind of the before state. We filled it in. Again, it's looking for that run_browser_steps sheet. And afterwards, it looks like this. It fills it in green. It extracted values here. It filled in this little form for us. Now, that's a basic example. Just imagine how many things you can automate. Setting up the same things over and over again. Attaching things to the right places. Any click that you're doing, you can automate repetitively, and you can link it to inputs and save a lot of time. I know I did. Again, I spent 40 minutes prepping a demo instance so it looked the way that I wanted and got rid of a lot of clutter. Every day I spent that. And then I made this, and it took about 12 minutes. I would wake up, kick this off, go get stuff done. 12 minutes later, I even told you how long it took and what steps. You can skip things if you want or pause to put in a password or make an action. Really, really cool stuff. Now next we're going to look at some things that just help you, little shortcuts and things help you navigate. So this one right here, Sheet Action Picker. It's one of my favorites. Use it all the time. You can jump to a specific sheet. You can go to the first one or the last one. You're really just entering a quick code. There are 30 or so macros that are very much like this for things like filtering and copy and pasting and finding and replacing, printing, all kinds of stuff that people do all the time. And it might take several steps to do it, or find the menu or click an itty bitty little arrow that's frustrating. This is easy for 2 reasons. One, all you have to do is enter a code. Like if we want to add a table of contents, I'm going to click T. It says, what cell do you want to link to? And what it'll do is at the beginning of your workbook, it'll add a table of contents. If you have 5 sheets or if you have 500, it's going to list them all out. So you can easily jump to one and then go back and forth. Now the other thing that's helpful in one of these pickers is it lets you set the default. So if you're always using F to go back to the first sheet, watch this, it's going to jump us back to that table of contents. So those two work really well hand in hand. You can set your default. So pretty cool stuff. Now, Filter Picker is a lot like that. So a lot of times you're working with data, maybe it's users or maybe it's accounts you're setting up or tasks, or maybe it's source data for matching, right? We're going to go to the Filter Picker. Actually, we're going to use a different one. Let's use the Accounts tab here. Let's say we want to go to everything that is a roll-up of cash. Okay, the first thing you can do with this picker is when you run it, you can apply the filter, you can freeze the panes, it'll even prompt you on whether you want to fit the columns. I don't want to here because we have some big ones. So that's one thing. If you want to filter everything that is true, okay, press T, it'll go to that value. That's T for that. Or if you wanted to say everything that is related to receivables, maybe you can do it again. There are several options on this menu that help you filter things, whether it's a number value, whether you filter in and out on errors or blanks or zeros or whatever. There's a whole bunch of things in that particular one that are really helpful for analyzing. Maybe you're iterating through all the different values that are possible. That's another common thing. So that's a good one. Now, what else we got here? So we talked through all these so far. Here's one that helps when you have matching. So if you wanted to say, what's the biggest, when you're setting up a data source for matching, you got to know what the biggest value is. So let's go into one like this. Let's say we need to know for all these columns, we're going to set this up as a data source. What's the longest value? Well, there's a macro in here called field max length. So what it's going to do is create another sheet and say for each of these fields, here's the max value that we have for that particular field in that sheet. So here's our sheet name, here's our column, here's what the field name is, assuming that's the top row. Here's the max value. Take a screenshot of this, set it up, super easy, right? That one's helpful. Searching recent files. Now I mentioned earlier, you're gonna have a lot of files that you're dealing with. You probably already do, you probably always will. This one helps you find files instantly. So just a little autocomplete, little search if you're looking for the word import. Let me try this over again. I ran that earlier and refreshed it. So if we're looking for a lot of import files, right, you can see how I've, done some before there. If you're looking for something like a balance sheet or something else, just type a couple of letters. One of the things you can do here is search either the entire path or just the file name. By default, it's the whole path. So if you want to look through just the file names, notice how the path is not there. But when you go to that file, it's going to have different things loaded for you. So downloads, here's something I downloaded. I can't tell you how much time this saves because people spend a lot of time looking for things. McKinsey did a research project, found the average person spends almost a quarter of their time just looking for information, files, that kind of stuff. That is a lot of time. This helps quite a bit. Unpivot table is another one. I won't walk through that one just to keep this video a little briefer, but if you have pivoted data like a trial balance and you want to unpivot that and stack it, there's a way to do that. It's literally called unpivot table. I know that's a big thing that I did all the time with data that people would give us. It wasn't too pretty. Literally, you just say how many rows are above and to the left of the data you want to unpivot. Very easy. And then lastly, this is one I do want to spend a minute or two on, is calculating amortization lines. So in this one, what you're going to be able to do, when you run this, it creates two sheets. One's called period end dates, another one's transaction list. And why you would use this is, normally if you don't have a standard period type, like a 454 or something, it's a little tricky on how to import, set up amortization, right? You have to kind of determine how many days and what the overlap is and a cutoff. This automates it. This lets you set up recs in BlackLine very efficiently using a data source or a scheduled list so that you get it right down to the day, whether you're rounding or not, whether you want to account for all the days in a period or keep them equal, this can do it. Now again, so you don't have to watch me fill this all in, I'm going to copy and paste from something I've already done. Off to the side here. So you have to put in your period schedule. Now, there's another macro that helps you do that, right? If you just tell it it's the last Friday of the year, there's 12 periods, it's a 454. There's a macro that helps you do that over here on the right called create fiscal calendar. That one's pretty helpful. So once you've done that, you can copy and paste your label and your start and your period date. Notice these need to all have 35 or 28 days. If you mess this up for some reason, it will tell you, you've got something that's off here. It needs to have everything cut off just right. Okay, so make sure you're doing that. The other thing you're going to have is you're going to have transactions. You're going to have stuff that went through AP, and you're going to want to split that out. So on your transaction list sheet, this is where you want to copy and paste that. Now the cool thing is, no matter what field you have in the report, like a GL detail or something that you're using for this, you can map it to what you want the output to be. So you're saying which field is the start date, which field is the end date, which field has the amount. There's some other options here that are lesser used, but all you need to do is pick out, how many days are in a period, or you want to calculate by the day. And when you run this, it's extremely fast. So if we want to calculate amortization lines, we just run it again once those are filled out, and it's going to take all this data, like I said, really, really fast, and create your amortization lines. So it copies most of the data, then it fills things in, like the, your amount, how much is left, what month is it in the stream, how many periods are amortized. There's a lot of great data here, and it also adds on your transaction list a sum and a difference in the amount that it did, just so you can make sure it worked and that there's no rounding. So hopefully you saw a lot of examples here that help you in your day-to-day using BlackLine and leveraging Excel and the power of it to do that when you have an add-in like this at your disposal. Now we're going to conclude with some whys here, because sometimes people miss the mark on why this is helpful. Clearly, we are trying to save a lot of time. Now, across this entire add-in, there are hundreds of macros. That saved me over 10 hours a week in my controller role, and I wasn't even using BlackLine yet in that last role. I'd used it before that, was hoping to do it again, didn't happen, maybe someday. This saved me 10 hours a week. If you add all the BlackLine stuff on top of that, it could easily be 15 or 20. Now, when you save time, when you automate things, you're probably reducing errors. Most people are happy about that because it reduces a lot of rework, and who wants to get something rejected by a reviewer? I mean, that's sometimes a little bit embarrassing. So we're adding control by doing this. We're making sure that things go where we want them to and in the right place. Now, some of the things that we didn't touch on here help you make things pretty. When you're reviewing things, we want to add conditional formatting. There are a lot of macros that help with that kind of stuff. And reuse things with kind of that default approach. Think once, apply often, refine if you need to. So this is just making Excel better and easier. So a lot of things that are deeply in the menus and everything, we're trying to make those easier to find and run and use. You saw the search box. There are a lot of things that work like that just make it that much easier. But at the end of the day, by saving time in all these different ways, what's important is what you do with the time you save. This is giving you that capacity to do more with the time, to be more analytical, to help develop the team, to collaborate more and optimize other things. That's most important. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you want to learn more and see how you can use this, reach out to me. Share this with a friend, tag, comment, like, and look below for the instructions on how to make this happen for you. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.